guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be the part 3 of the adoption story series, the last and final part of this whole entire story. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, I definitely recommend that you do that. So part 1 is actually about the entire process, what to expect whenever you are going through the adoption process, the different classes and things like that you're going to take. I definitely recommend starting with that video. And then part 2 is what it looks like after you get that first placement, maybe second placement, all the way up until you have your final placement that you're going to move on towards the adoption actual process. And this third video is going to be what does it look like after you finalize that adoption? How does it look moving forward? I got so many questions about this part of the story, and I'm really excited to share more of our journey. So let's go ahead and get started. So we've finally made it to the end, you guys. We are now a legal family, and it feels amazing. I will say though, we totally missed our caseworkers once the adoption process was finalized, because you go from having these monthly regular visits, regular phone conversations, and they completely just disappear from your life. And at this point, we had been doing the entire process for over 2 years, 2.5 years at this point. And they almost become a part of your family. They really do. The process and everything that you're dealing with almost becomes a part of your everyday life. And you literally go from these monthly visits, these regular phone calls, to nothing. And it's almost kind of like, what do we do now? It almost felt surreal, to be honest. You no longer have to abide by all of the CPS rules, and you could do whatever you want. And probably the most exciting thing for us was we were able to finally share photos of our boys on social media. So during the whole foster process, you're not allowed to share any of that stuff. You're supposed to keep the privacy of the children that are in your home private. I remember finally getting to share this huge album of photos of the boys that we had taken over the last 1.5 years, and I was finally able to share their beautiful faces with my family. So I shared so many photos, and that album is still an album that I go back and look at every once in a while and just remember their cute little faces. They have grown up so much. It's so crazy how quickly time goes by. This really is like a fresh new starting point, because before there were so many different parameters, there were so many different rules, there's so many things that you had to abide by, that now you truly can really 100% be a family. It is very freeing, I will be honest, and it's almost a little bit like scary at the same time, but again, at the same time, it's very, very freeing. So it's just the most amazing feeling to know that you're a family. At this point, once the adoption is processed and final, I had a lot of people ask, no, you have no risk of losing your children at that point. Obviously, there was a huge weight lifted off of our shoulders. We didn't have to worry about anybody taking the boys away from us. Once that adoption is final, it is final. It is 100% set in stone. So much so that you actually get a brand new birth certificate. Mine and my husband's name is listed as the birth mom and the birth father on the boys' birth certificates. So yes, you do get a new birth certificate. That was a huge, huge question. Their birth certificates, their previous ones, become completely void and null, and then their new ones become their new birth certificates, and that is what they will use for the rest of their lives. On their birth certificates, it says that I am the birth mom, and it says that my husband is the birth father. So it's actually kind of amazing to see all of your names together on that legal document whenever it finally comes in the mail. It really is incredible. So speaking of birth certificates, I also got a lot of questions about if you needed a lawyer at any point in time, and this is the point that you do need a lawyer. I will say though that the costs, even for this part, because you don't need a lawyer the entire process, you just need a lawyer to finalize the adoption, the costs were very minimal. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember how much they were, but I think they were under $1,000 to file the paperwork. You do have to have a lawyer that files the paperwork and helps kind of finalize the adoption so that you can get the new birth certificate with your name and things like that on there. It does take a little while for the birth certificate to come in the mail. I also do not remember how long that was, but it wasn't like a super, super long time. If I remember correctly, it was like 3 to 4 weeks, and we got it in the right amount of time that we were expecting. They were brand spanking new, and that is it. That's the only time during this entire process that you personally need a lawyer, and you can even have your caseworker or CPS caseworker or adoption caseworker find one for you. It's not like you have to go find one. They actually have lawyers that specialize specifically on this process of adoption. The next question that I got asked quite a bit is about the birth family, the birth mom, as well as open adoption. And we do not have an open adoption with the boys' birth mother and birth family. They don't necessarily recommend you do that, but they also don't say that you can't. So it's really up to you. You could have asked questions, you could have found out information, but we have just decided that that is not the course for our particular family. I think there are different reasons why a family or you would want to go one way or the other, but that is a very, very personal choice. And I don't think that you should make that decision lightly. And I also don't think that someone else's reason to do it or not to do it should sway one way or the other. We just decided to go about it this way, and honestly, it's worked out the best for us. I also just want to say that every single case is different. So there might be a case where it makes sense to have an open adoption, and then there are going to be other cases where it just is very clear that that's not a possibility. I'm not going to go into details about our specific story with the boys just because I don't feel like that's necessary to tell our story, but I will just say that it's definitely not one-sided. It definitely is a mutual decision. I also got a lot of questions asking if there could possibly be anything unexpected pop up after the adoption is final. And now, I'm not 100% sure the people asking that what they were referring to. I'm assuming they're referring to the children, and the answer to that is absolutely yes. There could always be something that comes up that you aren't aware with, but I don't necessarily think that is specific to adoption. I think that could happen with your own children. So for instance, both of the boys have been diagnosed with disabilities. Mason was diagnosed several years back, but it was also something that we were very aware of immediately. It wasn't something that we needed time to tell or even school to tell at that point. It was one of those things that it was pretty clear almost immediately that there was something, that needed to be diagnosed. He just needed some extra assistance. Now, as far as Matthew, he was actually just recently diagnosed. I think it's really important to know if you have any limits to the options that you are open to, and if there are certain things that you are not open to being very open and honest about that in the very beginning and making sure that you ask questions that would uncover something like that. For us, we were not worried about any of that. We were open to any disability or any sort of situation that could have come up. We did not have any parameters, but I do not think there's anything wrong if you do. I think it's a very personal decision, and I don't think it's something to hide or be ashamed of. I think it's completely fine to feel how that you feel and just be open about it. The next question that I got asked quite a bit, and I'll be honest, I was a little nervous to even bring it up, but I really want to be honest with you guys during this whole series and about our process. So I do want to go ahead and talk about it, but I definitely don't think that this is something to take lightly at all. Again, I don't think that every situation, every child is going to be the same. You really have to decide for your family and for the child what makes the most sense. And what I'm referring to is changing their birth name. So we did decide to change their birth name for a few different reasons. One, we really wanted them to have family names, and two, safety reasons, and then three, we wanted to also make sure that it was a right fit for them, and it really was. And I'll kind of tell you the story. When we first got the boys, they did not know their names, and we would call them by their names and they didn't respond. And there were even times where I would ask them, like, who is, I'm just gonna say, let's pretend one of their names was Bob. I would say, where's Bob? Who's Bob? Do you know who Bob is? And neither one of them, they didn't know their name and they didn't know each other's names. We played around with that for a while, a very long time, and they didn't know their names. They did not know their names. And I know that might sound very strange, but if you understood their history, it really wouldn't be that strange because of how neglected they were. But they didn't know their names. So it felt even weird calling them their own names, but then their names honestly didn't fit them, like, at all. It did not fit them at all. So we just decided one day, once we decided the names that we would potentially call them, we straight up just started calling them that. And we would ask them, do you want your name to be Mason? Do you want your name to be Matthew? And It just made sense for us. And I know, and trust me, there were people that were like, I cannot believe you changed their names. Oh my goodness, that's awful. It's not like that. If I thought it was awful, if it felt awful, if they reacted awful, if there was anything awful about it, we wouldn't have done it. So I don't think that anybody has the right, honestly, to judge about something like that. So if you are in the adoption process, you have to do what is right for you. That is my honest opinion. Don't let anybody discourage you from doing what you feel is right for that child and for you and for your family. And this felt right for us and for our family. We actually ended up calling them their names before the adoption process was final during the foster process. Obviously, we weren't calling them nothing for a year and a half. So it took a while. I don't think we started calling them by their current names for maybe, I don't even know, honestly. It was probably a couple of months in. We really talked with the caseworkers. We asked them how they felt. And we made the decision not only as a family, but we also made the decision with the caseworkers, and it just was the right thing to do. So they had been, by the time their birth certificates came with their current full name, they were already used to that being their name. And like I said, they didn't respond to their birth names. They didn't know each other's birth names. This just fit. It fit like the last and final puzzle piece to the whole puzzle of them becoming who they are today. So yes, I think that's kind of like the biggest thing. And I know it's almost kind of a little scary to talk about that because it is very personal. It is a very personal thing. And I think it's one of those things that if you've never been in the process, if you've never been in the situation, you could not possibly understand. For us, it felt right. And I am so glad that that's the decision that we ended up finally making, because they couldn't be more Mason and Matthew. Like, they literally could not be any more Mason and Matthew. So that is it, you guys. That is the final part of this adoption story. I honestly could talk about this all the time. I really enjoyed this series. I hope you guys did too. If you have any additional questions that I missed, make sure to put those down in the comments below. If there's just a few, I'll answer those in the comments, but if I get enough of them, maybe I will do a just final adoption Q&A video for you guys. I'll put those questions all together. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, not only sharing kind of the story, but also just a very realistic expectation of what to expect during the entire process. It's definitely obviously a very special story to us. The process was not easy. It was long, it was difficult, it was emotional, but I would not have done it any other way, to be honest. Like, I just can't imagine my life being any different than it is right now, especially because of those boys. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you're new to my channel, my name is Amanda. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, that notification button, and check out one of these videos before you head out, and I'll see you on the next one. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.